Parenting is hard. It can also be rewarding, but getting through the grind to the good stuff can be a real struggle. And all of us could use some inspiration, encouragement, or just a reminder that we aren't alone on this journey. Sometimes even parents need a timeout.
Hey parents, welcome to Parents Time Out. This is the time during the week where we gather with other parents and we share ideas, we ask questions, and we learn from each other because we want to fight isolation because we know that parenting is done best in community. So thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Kim Botto. I lead Kids Club and Student Ministry at Crossroads. I'm also the mom of 5 and the grandma of 7. Maybe by next week, it'll be 8. We'll see. So tonight, we're talking about how kids today are the most technologically connected generation ever. And there's all kinds of info and games that are easily accessible. And so is porn. The sex industry is a multi-million-dollar industry, and they are actively pursuing our kids. So as parents, we must actively fight for our kids. So tonight, we're welcoming our guest, Steve Andry, and he's going to answer our questions and give us some tools for this battle. Steve's the dad of 4, and he is a certified sexual addiction therapist. Steve, welcome.
Welcome, Kim. Thank you for letting me be part of this.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. I've known Steve for, gosh.
Yeah, we go way back.
Oh, a long time. Yeah, because I don't think you had adopted your youngest when I met you.
Oh, no. I met you way back. In fact, when we started Crossroads, it wasn't long after that.
Yeah. So
around Crossroads the whole time.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Okay. Well, I'm originally from New Orleans, so I'm a New Orleans transplant. Go Saints. I have an incredible wife, 4 beautiful kids, all adopted. We live out in Loveland and been part of Crossroads for a long time. So we're real passionate about family and enjoying each other. So it's a fun time.
Yes, you are. You have a super sweet and fun family. I always love seeing you in the halls at Crossroads. So tonight, our topic is, well, talking about porn can be uncomfortable, but as parents, we need to have those uncomfortable conversations. And so that's why I'm so glad you're here tonight, because hopefully you will give us some pointers and suggestions as parents to have those conversations. So I'm going to start asking questions. And if you're parents, if you're on, you can put your questions in the comments and then Steve will get to them. But first, Steve, how do I, as a mom, even talk to my kid about porn? When should I start talking? And then how do I do it?
I would probably offer that the earlier we start, the healthier and more aware the child is. Now, it's proportionate to age. And I would also offer that this isn't just a talk about porn. It's a talk about our sexuality, helping kids have boundaries, etc., and understanding that when they get into this, to help them understand what they're going to be seeing, what porn actually is, and how it's a disrespectful way of looking at men and women and our sexuality. So just be age appropriate, just be connected to and having those conversations ongoing.
So don't they say kids, the average age that they see it for the first time is what, 10 or 11? Is that still accurate? Or is it younger?
It continues to get younger. Last data I heard is that it's 3rd grade. I'm guessing it's younger than that.
Wow. So that's like 8.
This is intentional too.
Oh.
With it being such a high-powered industry, they're targeting our kids at a very young age. So you get them connected early, you keep them for a lifetime, so to speak.
Well, and I think that's important as parents that we know the sex industry is, you said, actively targeting.
Yeah.
The sex industry is actively going after our kids. So as parents, we have to be proactive in talking to them. So you said talk to them about what porn is and how do we even describe that. Let's say we're talking to, if they're starting to access it at 8, then we should talk to them at least before then. So let's say, how would you talk about that to a 7-year-old?
The way we approach it is we don't have that direct a conversation. So one thing we're doing is we educate ourselves. As parents, if we're not educated on what's going on, we can't be aware and in tune with what's happening with our children in the classroom, with their friends, etc. So it's not necessarily at 7 might be a little young to be directly talking about porn, but the idea of helping them understand their bodies. We know that things happen at young ages. We also know that children on the playground can do things we don't always want them to be exposed to or to be connected with. So unfortunately, a big source of this comes from the parents. We have history, and we see it, unfortunately, too frequently, where parents are exposing, fathers are saying, hey, here's my magazine, go take a look. Or uncles are sharing what they're seeing on videos with very young children, either directly or just in the room. The catch is, if we're not educated as parents, if we're not aware of what this is all about and how it's impacting us personally, and even whether it's in our home at higher levels, like older adults, older children using, we're going to be disconnected, and we're not going to be as aware with the children growing up in the home.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you talked about just talking to our kids about their sexual identity. And so how do we teach our kids what God thinks about them and their bodies? What do those conversations look like?
Well, I think that we have to look at the body as a whole. I think one of the biggest things we know, for example, when children are exposed to porn at an early age, their brain develops around it, the nervous system develops around it. And what you wind up having is a much higher likelihood of addiction in adulthood. That said, one of the other things we do that is extremely counterintuitive and counterproductive is we do not create an emotional language within our families. The more connected we are to the children's emotions, the less likely they are to want to medicate them. And porn is exactly what it's what we use to medicate our nervous system. So children at a early age can find joy in that, and then if there's not a connection with how we feel, they may use it even more pervasively because it does make us feel something, and that creates a risk.
Wow. I have never heard it articulated like that. As far as the more we're connected to our kids' emotions, the less likely they are to want to medicate them.
Especially
I know.
when we're talking about young men. We have this toxic mindset about men that we're not allowed to feel, right? Suck it
Yeah.
up. I'll give you something to cry about. Real men don't cry
Yes.
about messages. I heard on the football field all over. And it's a disservice to who we are as a person. And the porn industry latches onto that. And it's a perversion of what's really healthy. Our sexuality and our ability to enjoy sex is a gift, right? However, it's not the goal. And for some reason in our culture, it's becoming the target, it's becoming the barometer, it's becoming the goal. And we have to step away from that because sex is not intimacy. And we have started equating it with intimacy. The reality is, intimacy is a deeper place. Now, sex can be incredibly playful and fun and joyous when it's wrapped in deep connection. Okay? So when we start creating intimacy at very young levels, emotional connection, intimate intellectual connections, valuing what their opinions are, even if we don't agree, but helping them understand feelings and connecting them to accurate emotions, we start to ramp up the child's awareness of themselves. Okay. And that's one of the healthiest things we can give a child. Dan Siegel uses the term whole brained. Brene
Yes.
Brown uses the term wholehearted. What they're talking about is a very cognitive, intellectual person and a very emotionally present person. Well, unfortunately, we don't do well with that often in our childhood. We're not groomed and taught how to do that.
So I'm the mom of 2 boys,
Mhm.
And how can we as parents connect more deeply and more intimately
Mhm.
with our sons?
And I'm not minimizing the girls. They just get permission to feel, right? And it kind of doesn't get
Well, let's say for all our
yeah.
kids,
But
but
I am saying the boys are that's a great
mhm.
big one. And that is really just to sit down and having our regular conversations with them and learning how to pull out the I feel statements. Learning that, like, for example, if your boy comes home and says, man, I just really don't like school. Well, you start pulling out what they're really saying feels like. So what you're saying is you're uncomfortable with school, okay? Or, man, when he said that on the playground, did that hurt, honey? Did you feel a little like ashamed or embarrassed? Right? We're giving them language at young ages. The one thing I would also push against is it's not as black or white. We tend to label emotions, okay? So when we say something like positive emotions and negative emotions, and that is in the literature. So this is me. You guys can yell at me, but I really push against labeling them. They are uncomfortable or they're comfortable. They're pleasant or they're unpleasant, but they inform us as to what's going on in our world. And we want to learn to interact with them much like we interact with the feelings on the tips of our fingers. That creates an intelligence level, a presence within us, which then we don't need to go to when we start exploring sexually, when children start connecting, when children start seeing and exploring their bodies, they don't have to always go into this in a more pervasive way of feeling, right? Now, the reality is there's still a lot of research being done out there. ITAP, the International Institute of Trauma and Addiction Professionals, is doing some research as we speak, and they're looking at some of the impacts of this on children. So we're seeing it from the child's level as well as what also is happening within the adults of the parents, for example, what the child is exposed to through their parents. So, for example, if a father or something uses porn, which is extremely common, the data is scary as to how many adults find it okay. Well, the reality is that traumatizes not only the partner, but we're also seeing some of that trauma in the children. So then they start having a predisposition towards it, right? Like part of my story and part of many of the stories of the men I work with, they were exposed through their parents because it was accepted in the household. It's a norm. So being able to talk to it at that level and just being
Yeah.
aware.
I think one of the most hopeful things that you have said tonight is how part of being proactive is just looking our kids in the eye and talking to them. And when they come home, no matter whether they've got a skip in their step or their shoulders are slumped, just asking some questions or making some observations that then just start the conversation rolling can actually help protect our kids against porn.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the biggest
Wow.
tools we're using right now is the feelings wheels. So you can get it
Yes.
free all over the internet.
Yep.
But using those when you're talking with your children helps them understand good or bad's not a feeling. It's a measurement. Fine is not a feeling. And when we start giving them permission to learn a new language, a language that's very normal for us, it helps create connection. The
Mhm.
beauty of what you just shared, Kim, is the idea when we talk with our kids, we create a deeper attachment with them. When we talk feelings, we're connecting to the heart, we're bypassing the thought. So we're connecting to the body, which is where attachment really happens, which is the goal of this. To raise healthy kids,
Yes.
we want healthy attachment. Healthy.
Yes. And those feelings charts are so good. They have great ones for little kids. And I have found that sometimes when I'm trying to, I might say, oh, you seem angry. And I can't think of more feeling words. It's helpful for me every once in a while to look at a feelings chart to just come up with more language for it, not just happy, sad, mad, angry. Okay, we have a question from Stephanie where she's saying, what are some good book recommendations and resources that talk about creating emotional connections with our kids?
Yeah, that's a great one. Directly for children, I'd have to do some research and get back with you. However, I will tell you there's a couple of books out there. For example, Jonice Webb wrote a book called Running on Empty. Okay. And she followed it up with a book called Running on Empty No More. And that one is actually it approaches parenting and relationships from the standpoint of where we have emotionally neglected. Okay. So it's really, we have to understand that we are the greatest gift we give our kids. The healthier we are, the healthier they will be naturally without having to. So, Jonice's first book, Running on Empty, is a place of connecting to the neglect. It's one of the more pervasive wounds we see, this emotional neglect. When we address that, we heal that, we can move into places of how to help pour that and break the cycles into our children. And there are some other things like Parenting from the Inside Out by Dan Siegel. Great book.
Oh, such a good book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whole Brain Child.
Yes.
It's a phenomenal book.
Yeah. Whole Brain Child, we read in Kids Club like a textbook. I mean, it's required reading. I'd also say we talked a couple weeks ago about Playful Parenting is a book that's all about attachment. Because sometimes the best way to have conversations with your kids is in the midst of play. I always say my best conversations, especially with my boys, were with a pile of Legos or Lincoln Logs in between us. And then also Brene Brown has a book, Imperfect Parenting, that is a great parenting book.
Her work has shifted so much of what we do in therapy. Her ability to understand shame and how to break that, and her work is phenomenal. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, you brought up shame. Aaron asked a question about what would you say to parents whose kids are in the middle of a porn struggle? And I think not shaming your kids is so important. So why don't you speak to that?
Absolutely. Remember the difference, at least in my book, everybody gets their own perspective. But the difference between guilt and shame is that guilt is a mistake. We make a mistake. Shame is we become the mistake. So we don't want our child to feel like a mistake. We have to understand they're looking for something. So when they are in the middle of that, engage them, share with them that this isn't healthy, but tell me what you're trying to get out of this, right? Or help them, educate them on what they're really looking at, and that it's not going to help create healthy connection. And the arousal they feel, while it's natural, gets kind of perverted through that.
Right. One of the best pieces of advice I ever heard was I was at a conference and a dad was talking about technology, and he had found that his son had been accessing pornography. And then he said, and 3 days later, when I talked to him, and people in the room were going, what? And he said, yeah, I know you're all thinking 3 days. Why'd I wait 3 days? He said, because I needed to get myself in check and I wanted to pray about it. And he said, I thought, what could happen in 3 days? And he said, oh, in 3 days, God could change his heart. In 3 days, God could give me words that would really speak to him. And so I think sometimes as parents, we think that we have to respond immediately.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't. We can wait.
And we want to reloop.
Yes.
So when you say that waiting 3 days, we may touch on it and then revisit it a week later and a month later and say, hey, how you doing? And
right. Oh, now in this case, the son did not know that his dad had found porn on his phone. So it's not like the dad just found it. And of course his blood was boiling. He was ready to storm into his room. And they was like, wait a minute, I need to get myself in check. So I've used that a lot when I'm ready to lose it on a kid. I take a big deep breath and maybe wait. We have another question earlier from Erin. Let's see. She said, so it seems like emotional is the most preventative tool, but what surface level boundaries should we set with technology?
I like the way a friend of my wife said it. We steer hard. There are many apps out there that can that you put within the technology. And unfortunately, I'm not a guru around technology, But things like accountable to you, um, what are they, covenant eyes, all those. So one of the other things though is just monitoring the time use around technology. Okay. So one of the things that I think we're seeing a lot of too is this kind of babysitting. We've heard that before, where technology has become the babysitter. And these kids are able to access their technology way too often and way too much and way too frequently. And one of the things that we know is that the DSM is now has a section in there around video games. So we have to understand that video games is not a far jump into the porn, right? Because it hits some of the similar brain networks, etc. And you start create. So watch what they're watching, including some of these sensitizing games, right? If you look at some of the video games, they're being desensitized to porn already by the way these characters are dressing and stuff like that. So also be aware too that in these places you've got predators that are trying to get to our children, right? We know that they are using things to try and groom our children. So there is sexual content even outside of the porn. The catch is we want to steer hard. Yeah, we may be the demon or the bad guy or whatever we want to call it. But in the long run, I think our kids will thank us, right? So
Right.
we
And
have to really be in touch. And, we check our kids' phones. Now, I'm not saying we're perfect. I mean, we've had issues in our home. So they're aggressive and they're coming after us.
yeah, and our role right now is not to be BFF
Right.
with our 8-year-old. Our role is to be their parent,
Yeah.
which might make them angry sometimes, and that's okay.
And
And that's
the
why we
one
need
thing
adult friends.
absolutely. And that's the one thing, Kim, I think that's critically important. Our kids will always, always, always need a father. They will always need a mother. And we never stop being a father and mother, no matter what their age. So when we do that, we can let them have their friends, but they need our guidance. And when we set that up early, that lasts a lifetime.
Right.
So when we
Right.
shift that, we are depriving our children of some mentorship that they're going to need long term.
Mhm. And as an encouragement to parents out there, I have older kids. I have kids that are having babies, and I was not their BFF when they were in elementary, middle school, or high school. We had great relationships and we played and we had fun, but we had really hard conversations. I would say now, my kids, I do more with my older kids than I do with my adult friends. I mean, we are really good friends now. So there's a time for it. It's not before our kids' brains are fully formed. Let's at least wait till their brains are fully. Let's see, there's some suggestions. Molly gave some ideas on safeguards. So for those of you who are watching, look at the comments. And yes, Aaron, we will write a list of books and computer apps when this is over and list it. We'll get a list together. Steve, what are the percentage? You said that it's shocking how many adults are accessing porn. What's the percentage of adults?
Well, I've heard in two different camps. One, I heard 70% of men struggle with this. I've heard as much as 90%. Okay, whichever is accurate. One thing we do know is it's increasing, right? Patrick Carnes uses a term called we're facing a tsunami, and the tsunami is here.
Right.
The reality is this whole thing is devastating families. It's devastating men. And we're starting to see a rise in the addiction within women. So if we're having this, it's a hard battle.
So what happens if somebody who's watching and their spouse is addicted to porn or has issues with porn? What would you recommend that they do?
Well, first of all, I would encourage them to be honest and say, look, this hurts, right? One of the things we see is the gaslighting or the confusing of the partner, right? It's not normal. And whether or not everybody does it doesn't make it healthy. This is not healthy, and it does affect the brain and the nervous system. And often we see high levels of loneliness. So in the partner, right? There's levels where there's an emotional disconnect. The person's withdrawn. As they need help, remember that both partners need help, okay? The one dealing with addictive and compulsive behaviors and the partner, because it is a betrayal. There's a term, a powerful book out there is called Intimate Deception by Dr. Sherry Kiefer. She's a Christian. She's been on New Life Live. And she wrote this book, and they've coined the term called betrayal trauma. And it's very prevalent in partners. Obviously, it's mostly women right now, but it's in men too. And addressing both sides of this to help set healthy boundaries, to help understand what's going on. The other thing I would offer is get professional help. And while there are amazing therapists out there, there are many healthy ones, and there are many unhealthy ones. The key, though, is make sure you know you're allowed to fire us. And you need someone who knows what they're doing around this. Unfortunately, there are people who, well-meaning, who are causing more damage. Okay? So we have to have someone who really knows what they're doing when they're addressing porn addiction. And because the reality is, and I'm praying there are no children watching, this is not just about porn. The rise in other behaviors are increasing at, unfortunately, very rapid rates, right? From prostitution to massage parlors to all that. That is the unspoken side of this, and it's just as prevalent in our churches.
Right.
So getting someone who knows how to handle this, you're going to find someone who's not going to shame, who's going to help walk the person out of it. It's a process. It's not an overnight solution. And going to work to protect the partner. The partner has to be protected in this. We do not want them left hanging. The pain that causes for the partner is confusing and damaging.
So if there's any shame going on with the therapist, or if you want a therapist who is for the couple, not just for one individual.
No, you need them individual.
You need them individual. Okay.
This is not a marriage issue.
Okay.
Porn is not about the marriage. And if there was one thing I could say to partners right now, this is not about you. If your husband is using, it's not whether or not you're more sexual or not that's going to fix it. This has nothing to do with you. It's his choice. There's never an excuse to step out of a marriage. And this is stepping out of a marriage. The crazy making and gaslighting that happens with partners disorients them. That's why they need a therapist who knows how to help the partner, to help understand that that is a traumatic. The research shows pervasive traumatic experiences with a person who's being sexually active in many ways is very much like PTSD. They live in fight or flight. They get confused. They're activated. They don't trust. They're always wondering. And then they're made and demonized because their husband's saying, just get over it. You're getting paranoid. Most of the healing we have comes when the partner's well informed. When the partner's not informed, you have much longer periods. It's a much harder place to get the guy dealing with the behaviors healthy.
So what you're suggesting then, if a partner is struggling with porn, then both should be in counseling, but different counselors or separate sessions.
And probably separate counselors, okay? And one who understands what we call partner betrayal, or the betrayal of the partner, because they have to understand that's trauma, that's pain. That's not just something to get over. And there's a process to validate and help them guide into walking in truth, okay? The reality is if we've been keeping secrets, if I've been using porn or going to massage parlors or worse, I've been keeping secrets for a while. Well, that disorients anybody. And for me to all of a sudden tell my wife, hey, just believe me, doesn't work. And then we get irritated because they're not believing us. And it just creates a spiral.
Right.
My partner, Jane, specializes. Now, we're both certified in certified partner trauma therapy, but she works more with the partner. I work more with the guys dealing with the addict. But she has a whole process she walks them through. And it's not a quick process. It's easily 6 months to a year. So.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if you can see your wife, Kathy. Hi, Kathy, is writing in the comments all kinds of great stuff. So parents, please look at the comments. She just said, highly encourage you to set settings so that your kids cannot communicate with a player while playing games. That is so important.
Yeah.
It speaks to you where you were talking earlier about predators being on the games.
Yeah,
So,
she's really good at protecting. So,
Kathy is.
yeah.
So Steve, we're nearing the end of our time. What closing thoughts would you like to leave with the parents who are on tonight?
I would just encourage them that they're the greatest asset to their children. Okay. Keeping connected with them and making them the priority, which I'm sure most parents want to do, and becoming emotionally safe, emotionally connected. You're giving them a gift of a lifetime, and you help ramp up security and safety, even if these things are broached. So if they start using porn, they're going to feel safer to talk to you about it. We want to create these safe lives, these safe families, that children feel safe to talk about what they're going on. They're still going to have their moments, their teen years, whatever, where they want to be their independent. But we want to keep that connection open.
Yes, we do. And this has been so helpful tonight. And like I said early, hopeful too, because it can be very discouraging as a parent to know it's out there. But Steve, thank you for giving us very practical tools. Just really appreciate you and Kathy in the chat. And we have some resources at Crossroads. There are healing groups that are going on. Intentional Families is having some sessions on technology and kids, and we will get all of that in the chat.
I would also offer MHS. Men's Health and Sexuality is a phenomenal group that is at several of the sites.
Yes, it is. It's yeah, so we'll put a link to that also. And Steve, if people wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
They can do it through our website, Intech Counseling Group, or intechcounseling.com. And they'll see our whole website. And there are some other really good therapists, but there's probably a handful of us in the city. So we can help get you to wherever you need to be, is my point. We'll get you the help you need as best we can.
So reach out to Steve, check out some of these groups. Parents, we really appreciate you joining us for this conversation, because this isn't easy, but hopefully this has given you some confidence to talk to your kids. And I just want you to know, even if you feel like you're awkward in talking about this, you are the best one to talk to your kid about it. So start those conversations. We'll put some books in the link too. There's some great books for younger kids to talk about your body and what God thinks about your body. And then next week, we're going to be talking about how do we do church when church buildings aren't open, and how do we guide our kids spiritually in our home? Because we do a great job in the church with guiding our kids spiritually, but parents, you're with them much, much more than we are, and they're looking to you as a role model. So we'll be talking about that. And Steve, really have a great night. I hope, is Kathy like upstairs, or where is she? Is she behind you somewhere?
I'm at the office. So,
oh, you are? Okay.
She's home. So
you go home, take her treats, and she was home with the kids by herself. And yeah, thank you so much, Steve. And good night, parents.